This is the EWN Podcast Network.
Welcome to Late Boomers, our podcast guide to creating your third act with style, power, and impact. Hi, I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Join us as we bring you conversations with successful entrepreneurs, entertainers, and people with vision who are making a difference in the world.
Everyone has a story, and we'll take you along for the ride on each interview, recounting the journey our guests have taken to get where they are, inspiring you to create your own path to success. Let's get started.
Hi there, I'm Cathy Worthington. Welcome to our latest episode of Late Boomers. I'm here with my co-host, Mary Elkins, and we are welcoming today a new guest, Elizabeth Bruckner, the author of the book, The Homesteader Mindset.
And I'm Mary Elkins. Elizabeth is known as the fermentation maven. She's an expert on fermentation and composting and an acupuncturist as well. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Thank you both for having me today.
Tell us about your background. Tell us about your background and how you discovered gardening and composting and what led you to being an expert in homesteading.
It's funny, I fell into homesteading, and I think I did homesteading before I knew what it was, which I think a lot of your listeners might be homesteaders and not know it. Homesteading has many spokes to the wheel. And so during the pandemic, I actually became aware of how fragile our food system was. And it was a big culture shock because I've grown up in a very prosperous country. And I come from a family of war refugees from Belarus during World War II. And so I'd heard talks of not having food on the shelves, but it had always been stories. And I actually visited Russia during the fall of the Iron Curtain. And I remember seeing empty shelves and going, wow, I'm so glad that doesn't happen in America. And then the pandemic happened and our shelves were empty. And I attempted to get garlic and ginger one day, and I was unable to get these two organic produce. The produce section was pretty wiped out. And I remember coming home to my husband and saying, I'm really worried. Like, this is concerning to me. This doesn't happen in our lives. And he said, well, maybe you should consider growing some food in the backyard. I mean, we have a little bit of space. I live in the suburbs of Los Angeles. And I kind of cocked my head to the side and said, do you know me? Like, we've been married 15 something years. Are you aware that I kill everything in the backyard? There's nothing that lives. So I was known for going to the the garden store and saying, please, can you give me something that won't die? And then I would take it home and in 2 weeks it would die. And then I would go back. It was this vicious cycle. It was like they couldn't break up with me. I just kept coming back and funding their business because I didn't know how to grow food. And so I started
You're giving hope to people who actually have that experience.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not have a green thumb at all, nor did I know how to cook. I was a career woman, and I thought, here I was preaching to my patients that you need to eat whole foods, you need to eat good nutrient-dense foods, but I didn't know how to cook. So I outsourced a lot of my food. I outsourced the growing of it. I outsourced the preparing of it. And when the pandemic hit, I thought, I don't know how to be an adult. Like, it's time for me to step inside to my home and actually take charge of the things that I can be responsible for. And so that's when I started doing gardening and also learning how to cook. Like, I didn't know how to bake a chicken. I didn't know what broccoli looked like when it was growing out of the ground. I mean, I was a beginner and I was in my 40s. And so that's when I started looking up how to do this in Southern California, because, every region in the United States has a different growing requirements and different plants that grow there. And so I wasn't going to try to grow something here that couldn't be grown. And then I was looking on YouTube and looking through podcasts, and everybody kept bringing up homesteading. I'm like, what in the world is that? And then I realized
that's my question to you, because I don't really know.
Right.
I'm
what
like
is homesteading? Yes.
Well, what is homesteading?
I used to think initially that homesteading was mom and pa kettle, and they are out in the wilderness like Little House on the Prairie, and they're shooting bears to keep them off their land, and they make their own clothes. And that's the that was the original version of homesteading. So back in 1862, the government started a series of homesteading acts, which allowed the federal government to grant 270 million acres of land to private owners. Sadly, a lot of that went to very, very rich people, but there were a few mom and pop kettles that got their 40 acres and a mule. So that is what most people think about when they think about homesteading. But for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, that you're listening on another place that you listen to podcasts, you will notice that I did not make my clothes, and I have running water, and I live in the suburbs. And so the new homesteading, the modern homesteading, is a practice of cultivating resilience through an intentional way of living. And this involves reducing your toxic load, building your gut microbiome with nutrient-dense food, potentially growing edible landscaping, and connecting more deeply with your innate resourcefulness. Because our bodies know how to heal. That I learned when I started training to be an acupuncturist. And our homes can heal too if we just spend a little bit of intentional time in the practice of homesteading.
Wow.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, I do
Yeah.
too.
So, what is a homesteader?
So a homesteader could be a number of things. I would challenge your listeners to see if, as we talk today, they have any ounce of homesteading in them. If you're cooking from scratch, you could be a homesteader. Absolutely. One of the things that I say often when people are asking me, like, what should I do when I'm first starting to learn how to cook? Because a lot of people we don't know how. We're busy working. Is just buy, if you're a meat eater, buy vegetarian chicken. Buy a chicken, learn how to bake it, and then you've got 4 different meals that you can make just from baked chicken. You can have chicken soup, you can have chicken salad, you can have chicken with, a side of vegetables. And then you can make a meat stock, like a chicken broth that you can use medicinally for your gut. So that's one way, is cooking traditional foods, stepping out of the fast food line, stepping out of the boxed food. A lot of people think that, and I especially did, like a lot of what I'm saying right now is coming from years of wisdom from experimenting with things that didn't work well for me. And one of those things is I thought that buying like organic, happy looking boxes of food was healthy. And again, I was outsourcing, and people were doing a lot of seed oils in their food, in the packaged foods. There was a lot of preservatives. Even though it said organic, it wasn't healthy for me.
Right.
And so when you make it yourself, you know what you're getting. Another thing is growing edible landscaping. So that could mean going to the grocery store, if you live in an apartment, buying just a little pot of basil and clipping basil as you're cooking, or throwing some basil in water and just letting it become an herbal infusion. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a very tiny suburban plot, which is a backyard filled with cement, but there's a little planter around the cement, which is around a pool. And so I can grow food there. But for those in an apartment, you can actually grow food on your windowsill. You can use lighting to do it. There's a lot of ways that you can do it in any place that you're living with any type of body as well. So let's say you have terrible back pain. Aside from getting acupuncture or doing something to help with your chronic pain, you can also find ways to garden and to cook while dealing with back pain.
Interesting.
That's great.
Yeah.
Is there a link between mental health and homesteading?
Oh, that's a great question, Kathy.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I would say that, especially for Americans, I'm not going to speak for every person worldwide, but for Americans, we have a chronic disease of depression and anxiety. And a lot of that has to do with, we're living in a fast-paced world, and there's not a lot of room for health. If you want to live a healthy life, you kind of have to step off the treadmill and make space for it. And so what I often say, and this is from a wise friend of mine that told me once, so it's not something I created, it is the prescription for anxiety is action, and the prescription for hopelessness is gratitude. And so if someone's feeling depressed and hopeless, and they just don't think that they can they can make it, I recommend walking around your house. And this is from an author named Honoré Corder. I recommend walking around your house, touching the things that you have, and actually feeling gratitude for them. So every morning when I wake up, I will lay in bed and go, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful for this warm bed, for running water, for heat, for air conditioning, whatever the gifts are that I have that I see at that moment. And that really helps with mental health. Another thing that homesteading does in terms of helping with mental health is you're taking action because you are becoming more responsible for your food, for your health, for your well-being, for your community, and for your family. And there's a study that says folks that have habits that are using their hands are happier. So people that use their hands are actually happier. And homesteading is all about using your hands. You're growing, you're creating, you're building in some cases, and you're also cooking and you're fermenting. You're doing all sorts of wonderful things. And there is a groundedness that occurs, I believe, for me, because I was so allergic to the kitchen up until my 40s. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then when I started making food and sitting down, I realized that there's like a mindful practice that occurs when you are making food for your body. It's like you're going, okay, I'm worth this. I'm worth real food. And then when I sit down with my husband, he is a huge foodie. And so we used to do only great restaurants. But now when I make food, his pupils of his eyes get heart-shaped. So he's like, he gets so excited because he can feel the love. It's crazy. If you get really close, you can
Sounds
see
like
the
it's good
pupils.
For relationships too.
It is. It's
That's
very nourishing.
sweet.
Yeah. It's really very sweet.
Yeah. Oh,
I love that.
I love that. That's great. Tell me something. What made you decide to author a book called The Homesteader Mindset?
There's a number of reasons, Mary. Thank you for asking the question. I would say the foremost in my mind is I am a very enthusiastic teacher of what I learn. So when I was learning languages, every time a friend would ask me how I'm doing, I would explain to them how I'm creating habits to learn languages. And this has been throughout my life. I've been a mentor for many years for folks that need other type of spiritual practices. Now that I'm homesteading, a lot of my friends would be like, why, what's happening? Your skin looks better. You have less pain. You're happier. I accidentally lost weight because I was eating really good food. And so I'm always teaching them, well, if you make kefir cream it's kind of like sour cream. It's like a yogurt. Kefir, it's really pronounced kefir, but I can never remember to say kefir. So kefir, because that's what we say in America. If you can make that, it's very simple, then you can create incredible benefits in your gut, which then helps your brain. So what I recognize is when I eat well, I feel well, and people want to know about it. And as a practitioner in the clinic and in my online traditional Chinese medicine sessions, a lot of folks want to heal their bodies. They know that their bodies are capable of healing, but they're not quite sure of the steps. And so I really wanted to create a book that would teach you how to take what seems impossible and make it possible with really simple, tiny, it almost doesn't seem like it would be enough. Like I talk about starting with a 5-minute a day habit, and then we just talk about changing the mindset. You could actually take the Homesteader Mindset book and you could take that book and translate it into anything that you want to do. I want to start to learn how to sing. And then you could take the steps that I've created. And those steps are just about creating routine, because routine is everlasting. Whereas willpower, like I'm going to get up and I'm going to learn how to sing, or I'm going to get up and I'm going to learn how to raise chickens. That is very finite. You will run out of it quite quickly.
Yeah. Looking at the most difficult thing to do and thinking, I'll do that now. I'll start with that.
Yes.
Well, are there things in the book like how to ferment and how to make kefir? Are those in the book?
Yes, there's a lot of information about how to firstly find where to get these things. Because what I realize is that with this book, because there's so many spokes, there's so many things that people might be interested. For example, lots of homesteaders love to make sourdough bread. I do not. I don't eat sourdough bread. My husband does. And we have a baker at the farmer's market that makes exquisite 48-hour fermented sourdough. So I'm never going to learn how to make sourdough unless I have to. I have no desire. And there are, as I said, many spokes of the wheel. So there are hundreds of things that people could want to learn. what I help people do, there are a few things where I'm actually saying, here's a really easy recipe, or here's one thing that you can do. But I took 3 different families in an urban setting, a suburban setting, and a rural setting. And I showed the reader through the stories, how they found the things that they needed to find. For example, if they wanted to know kefir, you could go to the back and see if I wrote anything on kefir, but you could also go to I have a book bonus, which you'll both see when you get the book. I have a book bonus that gives you links for everything that I've learned. So you can pick and choose what you like. And then also, how do you learn these things? Because for me, I'm a little younger than a boomer. And I just want to say, hat tip to the name, late boomers is adorable. And it's so important that we have a voice for our wise elders. It's so important. And I just I'm enthralled that you two are doing this and that you have a really good name. So what I recommend is, for me, I didn't know, this is going back 10 years. I didn't know that YouTube had something other than cat videos and makeup tutorials. Like, I thought that's all it was. I didn't, so I had no interest in going there ever, because I had nothing. I didn't want a cat video. Sometimes I do now, but I didn't want any cat videos. I didn't want any makeup tutorials. And then I recognized that you can learn anything. It's like having a wise elder in your family online that you can go to. How do I change the faucet in my bathroom? That's a version of homesteading, being resilient, right? How do I do composting? You can just type it in and there it is. And it's very visual. It's really good for visual learners. So for me, I wanted to step back. For those that are my parents' age, my parents are in their 80s, they're not quite savvy with YouTube. So I wanted to teach them how to find what they're looking for. So if someone has arthritic hands and they want to garden, they can actually go online and look up how to garden with arthritic hands. And there will be tools that are available and methods that are available. On top of that, I eventually will be doing a course on chronic pain, because I think that we need to get people out of pain as well.
Have you taught your parents to homestead a bit? Are they out gardening? Is this in their interest?
Oh, my sweet parents. My mom is this 5'2" spitfire of a woman, and my dad is probably 6'2", and he has a lot of difficulties with long-term diabetes and chronic illness, but they are still doing things outside. So they started raising goats before I was homesteading. And I remember going, Ma, Dad, that sounds crazy. Why are you raising goats? So but they did it to create brush. They live in a very rural area. So they did it to clean out the brush. So they actually they were raising lawnmowers basically. And now they rent out those lawnmowers to other people that need to do forestry, like forest cleaning. And so I think they started homesteading before I started homesteading.
Ah. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I have another question for you. Where do you buy your food for cooking healthfully? And have you changed those habits from going to, say, one type of market to another?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Mary. And I want to say that what I'm going to say now is the end result of years of experimentation. So I started by going to, the everyday grocery store and buying. The first thing I started doing was reading the labels on the foods that I was buying. And if they had things that I couldn't pronounce, I wouldn't buy it. So if I found pasta and the one pasta said, wheat and flour, and the other one said wheat, flour, and, all these other very big words that sound very fancy, I would not buy that one. And then I started going to farmers markets, because we're lucky enough in Southern California to have round the year farmers markets. It's warm enough to do that always. And so my husband and I, this was probably, I would say 10 years ago, we started voting with our dollars, which was, we really wanted to support local farmers. We wanted to know who was touching our food. We wanted to get rid of the middleman. We wanted to get away from big food, big pharma, big ag. And the way that we could do that was going to farmers markets. So now when I go to the farmers market, I'm, well known, because I can say, hello, Sarah, to the woman that, that raises my carrots and brings them to the farmers market. And when there was an egg scare, there was no egg scare with my farmers because they were not gigantic farms that were having issues. They were tiny farms that were having issues. So right now, I would say 90% of my food is from farmers market and nearby farmers market. The other 10%, like, it's difficult to get dairy. I know of someone that has dairy cows, but I'm not willing to drive an hour. So I will go to just a one step up. It's locally owned grocery stores that have milk that are from farms within California. So I'll do that. And then I also really like, there's two online places where you can get food that is relatively inexpensive that has a health bend to it. I do say, though, after I say these two names, that you do need to still look at the ingredients because they have lots of stuff that isn't that healthy. So one is thrivemarket.com and the other is Azure Standard. I really like Azure Standard. That's AZURE standard.com. I really like Azure Standard because a lot of it comes from their farm. So, and they source from fair trade. They source from people that are taking good care of their animals and their crops. So you're getting happy food there. And so when I need something like coconut oil, I will order it from Azure Standard.
It's
that's
different
good to
there. Coconut oil is different there versus the market.
Well, what it's doing is it's a number of things. Number one, it's supporting that farmer, because that particular farm is not a big, gigantic, huge corporation. And so a lot of times with grocery stores, we have the farmers and then we have the middleman, the sellers, and then we have the farmer's market. Then we have the grocery store. And what's happening is you're paying everyone there. And what I like to do is take out the grocery store middleman, take out the buyer middleman, and just pay the farmer so that it supports more sustainable farming. It supports more fair trade, and the money's going directly in the pocket of the farmer.
That's great.
I started slow though. I started with just going to the grocery store, just looking at labels. Then I would just on, nice days when I felt like it, I would go to the farmer's market in my fancy little, sundress. And now it's something that I do every weekend. Like that is my shopping is I go to the farmer's market.
That's great. And you talk about the three things that turn a homesteader mindset into a reality. So what are the three things?
Those three things are simple. And again, you can translate this into any type of mindset that you want. The first is pick a corner. The second is immerse yourself in found time. And the third is make homesteading a priority. So let's talk a little bit about these three things. Picking a corner, what does that mean? What I often recommend that the listener, or in the case of my readers that are reading the book, I recommend sitting down for 10 minutes and daydreaming. What does homesteading look like to me? What would be my ideal homesteading adventure? And so as we're listening to this and somebody's going, oh, she doesn't want to make sourdough, but I would love to put on an apron and make sourdough and share it on Instagram with the pretty little leaf, one of the little leaf patterns that people put on their bread. Like that's not my thing, but that might be someone else's. And so grab a nice warm beverage, like a cup of tea or herbal infusion, sit down and just think, what would feel incredible? What would my wildest dreams look like in terms of homesteading? And then when you're looking at that, and that happens a lot, like Cathy, you were talking about a relative that's moving soon into a new home, like they can sit down and go, what is this house going to bring me? What do I want? What do I envision in it? And maybe that person will envision a herb garden in the backyard. And that's what they want to talk about and think about. And that's just what lights them up. Or for me, my next step is I would love to get chickens in my backyard. I would love to feed my chickens my vegetable scraps, because we have a lot of them, and then have these beautiful eggs that I can bring into the house. I would love that. And so if I were daydreaming about that, I would think, okay, the first thing that I want, let's go back to the relative that has a new home. They want this herb garden. The first thing I would think is just what will an herb garden bring me? Oh, well, in the morning, I'll go outside and I will snip off some parsley to put on the side of my plate with my eggs in the morning, or I'll use rosemary in my chicken, and I'm going to have rosemary, I can just snip out. It's so great to go grocery shopping in your backyard. It is so much fun. And then as you're looking at that daydream, then you've decided to pick a corner. My corner is I'm going to make a small 5 herb garden. That is my corner. So now once we found that corner, That's my dream of my homesteading. It's the corner of the homesteading dream that feels really, really good. Then I'm going to immerse myself in found time. So a lot of people talk about dead time in language learning. Use dead time to learn languages. I really don't like the term dead. It just doesn't seem fun. Like, who wants to use dead time? So I use found time. And found time happens whenever you find yourself looking for distraction, whenever you're grabbing for distraction. You might be anytime that you're picking up the cell phone and you're not expecting a call and you're not expecting a text, but you're picking it up and you start scrolling. That's found time. That's the 5 minutes that turns into 2 hours. I mean, we've all been there, right? We've decided to go on for 5 minutes. Next thing you know, it's dark outside. Like, how did that happen? That is found time. And what you can do is you can harness that found time. And you can do it by saying, for example, let's say you really like social media. That's what you're into. And that's what you grab for. You can make an account solely on homesteading. And that account can be all about herb gardens. What does it look like in Pinterest? What are the most beautiful herb gardens? And then when you're pulling out that phone for distraction, you're learning as well. Oh, I didn't know that it's really easy to grow mint in shade. I had no idea. I have a lot of shade in my backyard. And then that 5 minutes is now 5 minutes that you're using. The next thing that you do in terms of immersing yourself in found time is creating habits around that. And my book talks a lot about it. And at the end of our conversation, I'll make sure to offer a free gift for habit stacking tracker. And then the last thing that we talk about of the three is making it a priority. And this, I think, is really hard in our day and age because we do have priorities. Our priorities are make sure that there's a roof over our head and that our children are fed and that we're, and then if you go even a little farther, are we taking care of ourselves by brushing our teeth every day? Are we eating well? Are we moving our body? All of those very important things are priorities, but sometimes they become overwhelming. And if we just take one priority and say, this is a priority for joy, I'm going to do this solely for joy, not for fear, not even for preparation, just to ignite some delight in my life. And you make homesteading your priority there, and you do 5 minutes a day, you will wake up more invigorated every morning. So if you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, today's the day I'm going to learn about where I should plant my mint. And then the next day you're like, okay, now I'm going to plan how to get to the garden store. And then there's another 5 minutes. Again, it's 5 minute increments, 5 minutes of going to the garden store. Can I please have mint and bringing it home? 5 minutes of planting it. Every single action that you take towards that priority, towards that vision of delight will then give you the same wonder that you had when you were 5 years old. I mean, do you guys remember waking up at 5 and being excited, right?
Yeah, I love that. Talking about your book a little bit, I think you just answered the question that I had for you as who would benefit from reading it. And do you have to be a homesteader to read it? And I think you answered.
I think this is a good question to focus on because a lot of people will go, oh, well, no, because I'm busy or I have a PhD in microbiology, so I shouldn't be getting my hands dirty. And that obviously isn't for me. I would say that if you want fulfillment, one of the most important things is to get your hands dirty, whether it's, making something in the kitchen or creating fermentation or playing with your kids out in the grass with bare feet, or getting your hands dirty in the compost pile or in the garden. Anyone can be a homesteader, regardless of where you live, regardless of your age, and most importantly, regardless of your socioeconomic status. Because I think that sometimes people think, well, that's for bougie people that are going, like, oh, you have to have a yard in order to do this, or you have to have, and that's not the case. And I've actually talked about a few ways that you can save money. And homesteading can actually be something that's really good when you're doing it on a budget.
Oh, yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about this, but tell us a little bit more about why willpower isn't enough to create a life of traditional skills and what to add to that.
Yes, I think this is another one that's really important to repeat because a lot of times people think that, well, if I just had enough willpower, I would be healthier or I would have a better life. And yes, willpower does have something to do with it. I think willpower is really good for the first 30 seconds of a habit, but willpower is finite. So there have been some studies done. There's a great book called The Power of Habits by Charles Duhigg. And in it, there's a ton of research on the brain. And one of the studies showed that if someone had to do a hard math puzzle that they didn't like, and then they had to use willpower, like they had to, the researchers said, okay, you can have this cookie, but I need you to wait as long as you can before you have this cookie. Those that had to do the really difficult math puzzle, so they had to concentrate, they had to use their willpower to do that. When it came time to eat the cookie, they ate it much faster than the others. Then the control group was just, can you wait? Just wait as long as you can before you eat this cookie. And they were able to wait much longer because they hadn't exhausted their willpower with something else. So willpower, willpower is finite.
I didn't know it was that finite.
It's that finite. And it does, of course, it does regenerate. Like every day is a new day. But routine is everlasting. So there's a part of your brain that's, and many people have talked about that. We've got the prefrontal cortex. And for those of you that aren't watching on video, I'm touching my forehead. The prefrontal cortex is something that kind of differentiates us from reptiles and from animals that don't raise their young, so they don't have a lot of bonding. And the prefrontal cortex is all about, should I, shouldn't I? Is this dangerous? Is it not dangerous? So the biggest example is you're walking in the park and you see what you think is a snake, and then you realize it's a stick, and then you keep walking. Is it a stick or is it a snake? Your body is constantly checking for danger, but it's not, it's thinking about it logically. If it is a snake, then your reptilian brain will take place. And I'm actually touching the base of where my neck and my head touch. That's kind of the base of the brainstem. That's the reptilian brain. And that will, when you see the snake and it is a snake, you're going to yelp and then you're going to run without thinking. And it makes for some very hilarious videos, right? You've seen lots of people jump up when they're frightened and then off they go. And it's hilarious because we're seeing them unfiltered. We're seeing them from the reptilian brain. Well, the beauty of the routine is that it is also very close to that part of the brain. It's once you get a routine going, it's normal. I mean, I can see the two of you are absolutely beautiful women. It looks like you do your hair every day, and you have a little bit of makeup and you've got, you're youthful and joy. You look like you're put together. Well, the first day when
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I saw Instagram videos of you two, and I was like, I've got to make sure that my hair looks nice today because these girls have style. I've got to step it up.
You're so cute.
But we have a routine, right? So you're not actively thinking like, I need to get my bangs to go to the side, and how do I do that? Because you know how to do that now. When I wake up,
you say.
That's true. We all have some stumbling blocks. When I have a cowlick, forget it. There's just no getting it done. But a lot, like even when we drive to work, right? We don't think about, oh, I made a left turn and then I made a right turn and I made a left turn. Our routine is there. We already know how to do that. And so when we are creating a homesteader mindset and we're creating traditional skills, we want to create routines so that there is no thought patterns on it. And some of the ways to do that is to connect habits. For example, when you brush your teeth, I'm going to look up, 5 minutes of YouTube videos on how to grow rosemary in my garden. And so I'm brushing my teeth and I'm looking at, maybe I would have watched some celebrity gossip, but instead I'm brushing my teeth and I'm connecting that habit to doing something that's really easy but productive. That's habit stacking. And in that way, you can create these routines that are already happening on routines that you already have. You could be a smoker. I don't want anyone to be a smoker, but if you have a habit of smoking, it's a very regular routine. Typically, people go out for their, noon break and their 4:00 break. Well, you can habit stack. You can add another habit that is good for you onto that habit. And then eventually you can think about not smoking again, but eventually you will have another routine that's positive and that's productive.
Yeah.
That's a good plan.
Absolutely. That's great advice. What are the 3 big myths that stifle positive living and positive thinking? And how do we kick them to the curb? Is that by habit stacking?
Yes, habit stacking has a lot to do with that. I love talking about the 3 big myths. There are actually 3 chapters in my book. The first is I don't have enough time, I don't have enough money, and positive change is too complicated. And you will hear that all the time in any type of accomplishment that people have tried. So for instance, Cathy, you have like this incredible Instagram and you have a a background in TV and films, right? And so I'm sure that every time you mention your background in TV and films, people will say, oh, I've always wanted to do that. I've always like, I hear that a lot when it comes to language learning and when it comes to homes. Oh, I've always wanted to do that, but I just don't have time. I'll do it when the kids are grown. Or, but I just don't have money. I don't have money to, to get headshots or whatever you need to do to become that. Or it's too complicated. You do this, but I could never do that. That's not true. We can all do, if we have a strong desire or strong fulfillment, it's absolutely possible. And so when it comes to I don't have time, we talked a little bit about that. You're utilizing found time. You're creating habit stacks and habit chains. Habit chains is a little different than habit stacks, which is you take a habit that you already have and you chain something right after it. For example, when I wash my dishes, right after I wash my dishes, I'm going to put my shoes on and go for a walk. I'm going to put my shoes on and I'm going to go for a walk. And that's the habit chain. I have the shoes out. I'm ready. And so now it's just automatic. It's not, I wash my dishes and I think about, I should probably do it in an hour or 2 hours. And then it never happens. A habit chain. Now, when it talks about not having enough money, this is a really important topic because I think it affects a lot of people in our modern society. They're working hard, but they're still not making ends meet. How on earth could they start homesteading? Well, I will tell you that homesteading can save you money. Some of the ways is knowing how to upcycle. For example, I make cleaning solution with homemade vinegar. So I take fruit scraps, I throw it in some water with some sugar, I stir it once a day, and in 30 days I have vinegar. And then I take that vinegar, I dilute it with water, I put a few essential oils in it, and now I have what in the grocery store I would pay, $8 to $9 per bottle. I now have 5 or 6 bottles from that half gallon of vinegar.
Is that recipe in your book?
It's not, but I should put it in the next book because I think it's really important.
Yeah.
And it's fairly easy to make. There is a woman on YouTube, her videos are not edited, so they're a little lengthy. It's called Rain Country Homestead, and she will tell you how to do fruit scrap vinegar. But I think I'd like to put that in the next book. Yeah, fruit scrap vinegar. And it smells great. I do it with like lemon and tea tree to kill bacteria. And then it cleans your whole house, that and baking soda. And now I've saved hundreds of dollars on cleaning and I've reduced the toxic load in my home. Another thing that you can consider if you live in the urban area or suburban area is one man's trash is another man's treasure. So I'm sure we've all walked by a fruit tree in bloom and you see fruit rotting at the bottom of it because that poor person, they might not be poor, but that poor person that has a home, they're working every day and they just don't have time to pick the oranges off that tree. Well, if you knock on that door and say, listen, I would love to harvest your fruit. And I say, I'll take a third, I'll give you a third, and then we'll donate a third to charity. What do you say? I will bet you 9 times out of 10, that person will be so happy to get the rotten fruit or the potential for rotten fruit and just feeling bad every time you drive by it in your driveway. They will be happy to share it with you. Another thing you could do is sharing land. So if you're in an urban area, specifically, a lot of people say, they just have apartments with absolutely no yard. You can find little plots in the urban area that look a little deserted. And I'm talking about just the plot in front of the front door, not like an empty lot. And go knock on that door and say, look, I'd love to grow some herbs and I would love to use your land to do it. And let's split it 50-50. Now you're not looking for a community pot. You're not, applying for a community garden and trying to get in. You're just finding someone and reverse engineering finding land. And then lastly, propagation, which is one of my favorites for saving money, is there's a lot of plants that if you clip off a branch of them and stick it in water, it will grow roots and then you can plant it. So no seeds required. You don't have to go to the garden store. I have been known to take a bowl and some scissors and knock on my neighbors' doors and say, hey, do you have any plants that I can propagate? And then often we share a lot. I have probably about 20 plants in my yard that were from propagation.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Tomato plants. You can cut a tomato plant and you can actually take a tomato plant. If they grow in your region, you can just stick the branch in the ground and it'll start growing. I really like to see the roots. So typically in my bathroom, there's a nice sunny windowsill and I'll put it in there. Mint can grow that way. Let me see if there's anything else that would be fun.
Rosemary?
I don't know. I've not tried rosemary because my rosemary bushes have been so they're so prolific that I haven't done that. But
yeah,
I have done.
rosemary grows so gigantic all by
Yeah, it
itself,
does. It
It
does.
really does.
It takes over
You could,
everything.
It does. You got to eat a
yeah,
lot of it.
I have a massive one.
Do you? Yeah, I love
Yeah.
rosemary. So those are a few, but you would be surprised. And I would say if you're not sure, clip it off, put it in water and see. You don't even have to look it up. Just see what does it hurt. Now, lastly, positive change is too complicated is the third one. And this, I think, is the crux of my success as a homesteader and in much of life is that I keep it really simple. So I find out what I want to do. I try to center it around delight and joy because before, like I'm in my 50s now, but before my 40s, everything was a chore. Even the fun stuff, like vacation was a checklist. I have to do this, I have to do that. And it was not fun. Like I wasn't having any fun. And then I started learning that when you do things for pleasure, your brain actually wants to do more of it and you become more successful. And so keeping it really simple, and there's a process to that, which is in the book, and also looking for moments of joy will make you a better wife, mother, business owner, employee, community member. If you're happy, you're going to be more productive. You're going to be way better, way more fun to be around. You will make the world a better place if you focus on delight.
Well, talking about that, you share about using play to establish homestead habits. So that sounds like what you were just starting to touch on a little bit. Can you explain that?
Yes, I can. Choosing a life of delight makes for a vibrant existence. And so I think a lot of times people don't know that is the secret to many people's success. I don't want to be a successful person. And I think a lot of listeners will agree, and maybe you two will agree as well. I don't want to be super successful and miserable. I mean, I know a lot of people that have a lot of material wealth or a lot of accolades or even a long alphabet after their name of, PhDs and MDs and all these things, and they're not happy. I would take the person with none of that has an authentic smile on their face. I would want to know what their secret is because it doesn't matter. The truth is, when we pass on, right, we're not going to get to have any of the material as well. I'm not saying not to have the material, have it, but have it and be delighted with it. And so I learned that learning for pleasure, it does a number of things. It improves your mental health. We just talked about that. It's creating neural pathways that are comfortable and fun and attractive, as opposed to when I was talking about having the checklist and, I got to pack everything and it has to be good and it has to be perfect. That's going to create neural pathways that light up your pain receptors. So a lot of people don't realize this, but when you learn stuff, it's actually painful when it's brand new. Because it's new, there's no train track. There's no neural pathway that's already there. You got to create it. It's kind of like taking a machete and going through a jungle to get to what you need to get to. So you want to do it as gently as possible, and you need to have pleasure to get to the treasure. If there is no treasure,
I like that.
I know I didn't mean to rhyme, but there you go. Now we have a t-shirt. Use the pleasure to get to treasure. Once you fill up with delight, once you fill up your self-care cup, you are going to be way more motivated to use that little bit of willpower that you have to create those routines. And then your life will be inspiring to others, which I would say, we could even look at what you two have done, Mary and Cathy. You've created a podcast. Not everybody does that. And you've created a podcast, and like me, podcasts didn't exist when we were younger. Like there was, it's not like we know podcasts. There's a lot that goes into it. There's sound, there's recording, there's setting up guests, there's figuring out what you're going to ask and when you're going to ask it. There's so much to do. And if you don't have a little bit of joy for doing it, I know that many people can't get past the third episode because it's too difficult. But if you have pleasure, if you have play, if you pique your curiosity, which I think is what having these conversations are, right? You're using your curious nature to learn more.
I think it's the joy in it. Yes, I was about to say that too.
Give us the joy.
Exactly.
We get the joy from people like you that come on and say,
absolutely.
"Oh, you guys are doing a great job."
we read each other's minds. I was about to say the same thing. I have to ask you though. You have a quote in your book that says, "Badly done is better than well said." Tell us about that. That's different.
That is different, isn't it? Yeah. Well, it's a spin on Ben Franklin's quote, which is, "Well done is better than well said." And I thought, well, that's nice.
Mm-hmm.
Except that doesn't work for perfectionists, because the perfectionist will never get the podcast made. The perfectionist, first of all, during my 20s, when I really had a hard time with self-criticism, etc., I wouldn't have even gone on a podcast. Like, to be recorded and to fumble and to make a mistake, and maybe I say something wrong. And nowadays, when you record something, somebody's going to listen to it 20 years from now, and maybe you weren't supposed to say the word blue and you said the word blue, like it could be, there's a lot of anxiety that could be produced around that. And so when I make starting something and doing it badly done as my battle cry, that is when I go, you know what? It's going to be messy. I'm going to make messy mud pies. I'm going to be really cute with a little bit of dirt on my nose. And people are going to love me because I am authentic. Then it doesn't matter if it's badly done.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so I would love to say to people, make a really messy, terrible herb garden. Make an herb garden where 4 out of 5 of your plants die, because you will learn, and then you will eventually create an herb garden of your dreams.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah.
And how did you manage to harness a homesteader mindset while dealing with chronic illness?
Well, that's probably going to be another book, is stepping out of chronic illness. So in my 40s, I lost the decade of my 40s to illness. I was bedbound for weeks. I was homebound for months, and I was unable to work for years. And when I woke up, I was in my 50s, and I was like, oh my gosh, what happened? What happened? And this chronic illness made it so debilitating that I remember saying to my husband, I can't do anything. I wasn't able to think properly. It was a lot of gut issues that were causing problems with my brain and causing incredible weakness. I couldn't walk for more than 5 minutes. It's not quite the coming out of a coma, like the man that wrote the Goya guy. I forget his name.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You have so many people.
Yes, get off your ass.
That's right. That's the guy.
Oh, Goya, get off your ass.
That's right.
I didn't know what we were talking about, of course.
Yeah, he had a very traumatic injury, and mine happened over the course of a long time of being malnutrition by not eating good food and just not recognizing that I wasn't eating good food. And so what I learned in terms of harnessing a homesteader mindset during my chronic illness was that I had to start from the bare minimum. So originally, and I talk about this in the book, my husband said, all right, you need a to-do list. Here's your to-do list. Eat, poop, and sleep. If you do all of that every single day, you're a success. And so I was like, okay, I had something to focus on.
That's pretty simple.
It was super simple. And then eventually I was like, well, what if I created fermented vegetables, which is going to increase it's like a 12%. I'm sorry. It's like 12 times the vitamin content of normal vegetables when you ferment them. And here's a fun fact. A teaspoon of sauerkraut has more probiotics in it than an entire bottle of your $50 expensive probiotic formula that you buy at the supermarket. So making your own fermentation is pretty remarkable. And so that lighted me up. That and learning languages and just doing things for pleasure, because I couldn't do anything outside of that. I couldn't be responsible for anything aside eat, sleeping, pooping. When I started doing that, that's when I learned that I could harness even doing the bare minimum. And so for me, finding joy in fermentation was what I woke up to. That's what I wanted to do every morning. And that's what I want to give to my readers.
So
and listeners.
Fermenting like sauerkraut?
That's correct. So sauerkraut is very easy to do. You take some cabbage, you put it in a food processor, you sprinkle some salt in it, you let it sit for a day, and then you put it in a jar and you pack it down. It's got a little bit of juice, and then you let it sit. You can let it sit for 7 days. You can let it sit for 7 months. And then when you eat that sauerkraut, it's called lacto fermentation. So what you're doing is the salt is inhibiting the bad bacteria, the bacteria that's going to make you sick to your stomach or it's going to make you ill, and it's allowing lactobacillus, which is a different kind of bacteria that's good for your gut. It's allowing it to grow and flourish, and that's what changes the vegetable. It actually digests the vegetable. Those little microbes are eating that vegetable and making it easier for you to digest it. So when you have, right now I have a 7-month sauerkraut in my fridge, and it is so mild in flavor and so easy to digest. And yet it's my supplement that I have when I want prebiotics and probiotics.
That's great.
Yeah, I want to start
Elizabeth,
that.
I have so many more questions that I could ask you, but we're running out of time, unfortunately. So what would you like our listeners to have as their main takeaway today?
Oh my goodness. I would say that it's possible for anyone, anywhere to create a homesteader mindset, to create a life of their dreams. And if you like the just a small little tiny explanation of how to create small habits and then how to track them with a habit tracker, you can get that at my website, which is createwellnessproject.com/gift, GIFT. And it's possible to have the life of your dreams, even one little 5-minute snippet at a time. It is possible.
That's great.
Love
Thank you. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
Our guest today on Late Boomers has been Elizabeth Bruckner, homesteading expert and author of The Homesteader Mindset. Visit her website, as she said, createwellness.com or createwellnessproject.com. Thank you, Cathy. Or createwellnessproject.com/gift. And you get a free Homesteader Daily Habit Tracker if you go to that website and put your name and all your information in it. Thank you so much, Elizabeth.
Thank you both.
Thank you for listening to our Late Boomers podcast and subscribing to our Late Boomers podcast channel on YouTube. Listen in next week when you'll meet Chip Duncan and Salim Amin, the two filmmakers who have produced a phenomenal documentary called Stand Together as One, The Famine, the Music, the Impact, all about the famine in Ethiopia that led to the music business efforts of Band-Aid, We Are the World, and Live Aid. You can listen on any podcast platform, and we do appreciate you so much. Please follow us on Instagram at I am Cathy Worthington and at I am Mary Elkins and at Late Boomers. Thanks again to Elizabeth Bruckner.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you for joining us on Late Boomers, the podcast that is your guide to creating a third act with style, power, and impact. Please visit our website and get in touch with us at lateboomers.biz. If you would like to listen to or download other episodes of Late Boomers, go to ewnpodcastnetwork.com.
This podcast is also available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and most other major podcast sites. We hope you make use of the wisdom you've gained here and that you enjoy a successful third act with your own style, power, and impact.